the Red Sox, technology and leadership. Brian Shields, VP of the Red Sox, shares how he is and his team are leading, creating new fan experiences, pushing giant projects to success, all the remote workforce, all with an unknown future. Enjoy. Have a great day. Like just the leaps that we've made, right, in technology, right, the familiarity of the conference with the young kids and how we've, right, I think as a world of kind of forced Zoom into a pretty robust, more secure platform or just better behavior platform. What do you, is there anything that you're seeing, like, because I mean, you're in an awesome space, right, where there's events and people are very passionate for their entire lives. Like, are you seeing anything where some technologies that is not Zoom that you feel like is the next coming, or is really taking over your world?
Good question. I think one of the things with this whole COVID-19 thing that is going to be somewhat transformational is just I think obviously for everybody, the notion of working from home is won't be lost on folks. I mean, I've always kind of in the last 20 years enjoyed sort of probably more than most companies probably the ability to be able to have sort of some of my best resources scattered around the country, around the globe.
Oh yeah.
And I know that a lot of companies have historically been very reluctant to kind of open up for that, right? I think sort of maybe older generations, if they couldn't count the heads, kind of felt like they weren't in control of the situations. My hope is that during this period, as they see a lot of people being extremely productive, even while they're working at home and, widely accessible via tools like Zoom and other products, Teams and others, that they realize that proximity is illusionary, right? That what's more important is good leadership, that it does put a premium on sort of people's ability to be able to kind of work with their direct reports and others, so they get the most out of them, but it puts a premium on sort of people who can. I mean, it's hard enough sometimes, especially in the technology fields, to have highly capable leaders, I think, and who may also have certain domain skills. And now that some of their resources are not quite as accessible physically, potentially, I think it places a higher premium on the quality of leadership skills that we're going to have to focus on, going forward. So
if we've proven, or many have proven, that they can work very well out of their home, and sometimes those rooms are single bedroom homes and very, very, very small. What distinguishes in your mind, I guess, the habits of the manager or the leader that makes that work?
Yeah, it's funny. I was a little bit late coming to this call, in part because I'm talking with the company about kind of leadership development training, and sort of like trying to identify sort of where some of our people are. It's not unique to us, but including myself, where are we with our own respective proficiencies, and what are we setting as a goal, and how do we close the gap, and which ones are even potentially more important in a world with kind of remote resources. So I think I'm trying to create a little bit better career development plan that's a little bit more quantitatively based, so that we can kind of highlight those kind of attributes that we expect of especially of our leaders. And I think in our kind of culture, especially since we're not as big as some of the companies I worked at, a lot of the managers are really kind of like player coaches, right? So it's also, I think, for the folks like that, they have the added burden of knowing, when am I a player, when am I a coach, and when do people need my leadership skills, and when do they need my sort of domain expertise? And I think that's a challenging balancing act oftentimes for technology leaders.
Thank goodness we have video, right? Because I think it opens the door for leaders that maybe kind of lead in through more empathy and kind of human reactions, right? Mm-hmm. Other than people are literally just numbers on spreadsheets, right? Without the video capabilities, I feel like there's a lack of.
No, and I think a lot of it, as the tools continue to evolve, so that you can. I think there's going to be a lot of new technologies competing with Zoom in the very near future. I think everyone's now realizing that it's probably a model that's here to stay. Sure. It's not just for connecting with your aunts and uncles and your parents and things. That now that we can actually be highly productive. So I think you should start to see new tools emerging where like some of these already exist, but like where I can do whiteboarding kind of a little bit more efficiently, and you can do, not just screen sharing, but more, augmenting and other things, and operating a little bit more like you would in kind of a virtual session, a la like Cisco's kind of environment in the past or others. I think these boundaries will continue to sort of erode, where you almost won't know the difference between people who you work with on a physical level and those you work with on a little bit more virtual level.
Yeah, one thing I've been really intrigued with is I've spent a lot of time studying kind of the live streaming and those that are kind of DJ themselves, right? So they'll have like their iPad and then they'll have their cameras, and it's the orchestration of that, right? Like, so they'll whiteboard and they'll drop to their iPad and the screen flips to the iPad. Like, so if you're the viewer, you get to participate in that. And then it pops and like, it's just that nice sequence.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see, because all that tech is free, right? Like if you have an iPad and you have a computer, right, the be able to flip between the two is nothing, but there is a technology awareness barrier, right, where you have to really know how to attach the pipes to get them.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, by the way, because I would say, like, if you think about it today, like we think we're competent in tools like Zoom or Teams or other related Google Meet and stuff like that. But I think if you were to fast forward 2 years from now, I think we're probably more at like the 20 percentile level, right? Because it's like, I want to show you something on my phone. I mean, how many times now are you like, you have somebody come doing this, right? Like what I'm trying to show you is it's right like here, and and it gets kind of geeky pretty quick, right? And I think you're right. I don't think we're yet set up to realize, like, how do I leverage multiple monitors and a separate iPad and maybe how do I leverage a stylus if I'm trying to annotate and other things. And I think those things will become kind of more part of our portfolio of solutions as we kind of think about it going forward.
I think those behaviors are more natural, right? And the more friction we can remove, especially in technology and how we're enabling it, like in the products we make and the environments we set up, we try to remove that friction so it's a natural human behavior.
Yeah.
And like I want you to write your notes down, but I want you to be able to show it to me, right? And
Right. Like I use like a Rocket book for my notes as an example. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but like, so all my notes, I put a little scripting in there so they all automatically, when I'm done, I just sort of, almost like a QR code. I basically scan them and they all go into like my, repository, for like any other document as a PDF.
It's great, right?
And no, you're right. Like why have dozens and dozens of pads of paper with notes that you lose on a regular basis and things like that? So I think, I'm optimistic that all these things are going to make, well, I guess to answer your original question posed about fundamental changes in technologies and things, like I think that like our big focus right now, one of our big focuses is really driving sort of employee productivity. Like I think there's a huge renewed focus on like, how do you make people more proficient? How do you eliminate, inefficiency, right? How do we sort of allow folks to kind of, get their jobs done? How do we access to information? Like kind of, you name it. Like I think that I think being virtual is exposing that a lot of these historic dependencies on inefficient means of distributing information. Like, we hear about this sort of, what's your digital strategy, but it's so poorly defined. It's one of the worst, acronyms or expressions there is, because everyone's got their own definition. And so as a result of it doesn't mean as much. But for us, I think we've had a little bit of an epiphany of like, how do we create sort of a bit more of a, when it comes to certain content, more of a pull model, moving away from this dramatic push model that I think we've over relied on email, to the point of just blasting everybody with like tremendous amounts of data. And that is in one sense, if you think about it, I know for me personally, since I've been at home doing work, my email, even despite the fact that our spam filter is working overtime, my email volumes are skyrocketing. And, from a work standpoint, that becomes the white noise, right? It's more, it's things that you have to kind of sort through to kind of find little nuggets and stuff. And so, the more that we can move toward a pull model where at a corporate level, where we can sort of put these assets out there as content and allow employees to kind of collect what they need, not this shotgun model of, I'm going to tell everyone in the company this stuff, even though 6 people are impacted effectively by it.
Right. And I love I think the push-pull concept is super important for people to understand, especially when you pair it with your balance of you saying you're trying to find ways to make people more efficient, right? Not make them work more, because I think when we look at net, I think most people are working exhaustively hard,
Right.
but maybe we just don't have the tools set up so that they can achieve the objectives we need without burning out, right? Especially with creatives.
Yeah, no, totally. No, there's a lot of that. I think I mean, I remember my first couple weeks, operating off of like a monitor and things,
Yeah.
I get to 4:30 and I remember telling my wife, like, oh my God, I feel like I need a nap. And like, I don't think I ever felt like that in my life, but there is a little bit of a difference of sort of working in this sort of medium where unless you're kind of getting up and finding the time to kind of, I don't know, clear your mind a little bit and stuff.
Sure.
It can be sort of remarkably taxing.
Yeah, it's the energy, and I've been like really following I do a lot of mindfulness work
Uh,
with people, and so it's been a really interesting, kind of thread to see how all this is evolving for me in organizations. But I guess that's a good question to lead in. And like, how do you feel like you're growing maybe as an individual or leader, and how you're kind of adapting maybe for all this?
well, the one thing I feel really good about is, I've always sort of felt that like when I'm on like an airplane, say that like those moments are moments where I feel like my brain can breathe. Like, where like I think some of like, everyone needs these moments where you can sort of just, like reflect and think about and, be able to kind of think about the future and about what big things you need to do to be able to kind of align your organization or the company to success. And I think when you go to work, when you get in, like we're in a different kind of routine right now, right? Like every day almost seems the same sometimes. But the other way too, where I was kind of getting up, maybe working out, grab breakfast, get in the car, drive a lot, get to my office, do my thing, get out of there. It's like, there's a lot of, I don't, for whatever reason, like, especially with a lot of traffic, I just don't find driving in traffic is like, it's not like time where your brain can breathe, right? I mean, being on an airplane, for me at least, is, but being at home has turned out to be the same way too. I find like when I'm here before my day starts, I feel like I'm wildly more creative and innovative than I would be kind of in an office setting for whatever reason.
Interesting.
As long as I have my whiteboard and a few other things, I feel like I can, I don't know, it's some of that alone time is incredibly, constructive. And
Have you started planning, like making sure in your calendar you've got the 20 minutes or the hour for yourself to have that creativity?
well, I do, but I'd be lying if I said I'm doing a very effective job of that. I've gotten better at it, but I haven't quite. I wouldn't call myself proficient as of yet.
Not yet. Not yet. Do you push that to your team to like try to find like secondary outlets for just creativity, and guys, like, we're not having meetings at this time. Like, you should go
Yeah,
do.
I think we do. I mean, we probably could do more. I mean, I think now that we know that this model is at least here to stay for some duration of time, even with games, going to be played. I mean, the bulk of our employee base will still be working from home for, a fairly extended amount of time. That now I think we're entering into a new phase, right? That it's like this is the new normal a little bit. So it's not a interim step where you, I think I don't know if we ever knew initially. I mean, Gartner had this great. I'm looking at my office, like I flash this for you, but like Gartner used to have this great schematic that I printed out, which kind of talks about sort of this whole code thing in a series of like phases, right? So you probably can't see it in the background stuff, unfortunately,
Oh,
but
yeah, I got it.
yeah,
I see it.
it does, but it does a nice job of sort of like this whole kind of as you're sort of evolving from sort of like your normal run rate to this responsiveness to recovery to, this kind of restoration and more future view of the world type of thing. I really kind of believe that's how it works. And we're now, in my mind, we're kind of past recovery and we're into this new world, this new world that we're all living in. And one of the things about that is there's a higher emphasis in my mind of we've used this time off to kind of time off, but at least this time away, better word, for we retired a lot of our our debt, our tech debt.
Mm.
I feel really good about that. We've done a really good job of laying the foundation on some really key systems. We're moving to Google and GCP as our foundational data architecture in the cloud, and that's going fantastically well. We're rolling out Salesforce in another 2 to 3 weeks.
So big projects, right? These are
Yeah.
not, you're naming are not small endeavors.
No, big things that should be foundational things for well into the future. And I feel super excited about that. Now, on top of that, we're starting to, I think this is foundational on the pyramid, foundational elements that we're now starting to build on, building blocks that will have long-term value. And I think a big one there is like employee productivity. We're revisiting the relative priorities of a lot of our key projects.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of like trying to drive more revenue, obviously given the situation, because then obviously, sports being one of the industries most heavily affected by all this, and as well as driving employee productivity and driving sort of digital efficiencies and driving, and I should have led with this one, really kind of like, I think we're trying to build a new relationship with fans in some ways. I think you asked before about technologies. I'm excited about like everything around touchless, so I think we kind of view it now as we're storyboarding sort of, a fan journey.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, how do I make that journey as efficient, as safe, and as enjoyable as we can make it? And some of it's changes to like how we operate, like with everything from concessions to entering the stadium to health and well-being and stuff, and obviously social distancing and all those other kind of things. And I mean, if you think about going to a game in the past, you'd have these hawkers who'd be, like selling cotton candy and stuff, and people would be passing your money, 12 people to your left, type of thing, and cash your food back, right? Like, I think we all kind of look at that model and question whether that's the future, right? And so there's a lot of work going on to think about, like, how do you revisit a lot of these things? How do we do less with cash? How do we put more information in your hands in terms of whether it's on a mobile device or other things, so that you can navigate the park, or you can kind of get questions answered for yourself, or you can interoperate and pose questions to others, or have live chat sessions and things like that. So there's a lot of work going on right now to create an improved fan experience.
It's what you're touching on though is so huge, because before, no disrespect to anybody who's made these apps, those apps were just kind of like garbage and maps, right? Like the apps of the old were like, our app was a web browser with a map of the parking lot, and you could find your gate to get in. And what you're describing is a completely immersed experience, weaving all those customer dynamics and adding, I would imagine you're layering in like customer experiences and kind of video and audio and kind of, athlete encounters, like blending in the best of whatever social media platform traits you want into your own ecosystem. I mean, that's
well, so in our world, it's fortuitous for us, but Major League Baseball last year and a half or so has really put a big effort into kind of a big fundamental rewrite of the architecture of our mobile applications, and which is now available. And so we now have an opportunity. I don't know how much we'll fully leverage it in this sort of shortened season, but rolling into 2021, armed with an SDK and APIs and things like that, we now have the ability to kind of extend the functionality in a more in a fashion that we think will have greater value to the fans, and give individual clubs the ability to kind of augment it, where appropriately. We're doing some things with augmented reality. We've written our own games like bingo and things like that, where we're rewriting some of these things now so they get live updates during the game, but we're also making changes so that they're also a better experience if you're at home and you're watching a game, but you want to follow along.
Exactly. So why are people on Twitter watching a baseball game? Why are they on your app engaging, and literally like the commentary is like the last 5 first baseman coaches, right? Like that is a huge difference. And just like, yes, I could be on Twitter, or I could be on your app and talking to like the actual people, like people that I grew up with, and I hope my kids grow up with. And
sure. And also like, oh, here's the last play, here's a little video clip of it, and even if you're not at the game, things like that. So I think you'll see a lot of greater integration with social media. Some of those have been recently announced. There's a couple more, I think, coming, but so that's really encouraging.
So you're probably working pretty heavily with your chief marketing officer then on all this layering, right? I mean, from what I can read, and tried to do a little research. Like you guys are really pressing hard on a lot of different channels.
Well, I think we're certainly, I think all organizations, right, regardless almost of your industry I think we're all sort of scrambling to kind of align to, this new reality that we're finding ourselves in. Especially with the uncertainty of, a sense of how long this goes on for, right? And I think that's half the challenge in some respects. So, so I think there's a lot of energy. I think the challenge sometimes is, I've sent out a memo today and I wound up like sending out a correction like an hour later. It's like, I think the hard thing is things are moving at such a pace that it's, we're seeing it obviously as it pertains to COVID. My thing was about a COVID update. It's remarkable how quickly things are changing that we're just, that it is difficult to get the information right. So I think it puts a huge premium on those people and the effective communication in general.
So one question I wanted to ask, I know we're near the end of our time with you, but you mentioned all these giant projects that are really hitting their milestones and going into live production. Like what factor do you like attribute to that success? Like you did in the middle of all this COVID business, giant projects. They sound like they're going quite well. Obviously, all of them always have a couple red flags. So there's no red flags. We're not pushing hard enough. But I'd be curious if you could share like what you pulled away from that.
Yeah, some of it's good fortune a little bit because we rolling into or coming out at the end of last year, we knew that these were two areas in particular that we wanted to improve. We wanted to better understand our fans. We wanted to build an environment, especially it's our data environment with analytics that really was sort of a single view of a fan. And that sounds a lot easier than it is. Trying to develop that singular view of a fan with 25 to 30 different data sources coming in, all of different levels of completeness is no simple task. But for us, it's like we feel like that's sort of like foundational, right? That's table stakes for us to be able to kind of effectively develop and foster that relationship with a fan and be able to kind of, do the kinds of other things that we really want to do in the future, which is how do we give you kind of personalized content and experiential opportunities so that you get the most out of everything that we offer. And then how do we give, in our case, some of our sales and associates and things like that access to some portion of that information so that they can do a better job of doing outreach or react to calls. Yeah. So
relatable content.
Right. So these things, so we feel really good that we made some good strategic decisions that we think are going to pay off very well in the future.
I love it. All right. One more question. So you had a magic wand for anybody who is trying to do big things like you, either like they're a manager with a small dev team, they're an owner of a business, or they're leading the biggest orgs in the world like you. Like, what would you wish or tell people to focus on or to just change? Like one thing, what would you focus on?
Wow, that's a good question. One thing that people could sort of focus on, I think it's probably, well, I don't know if it's probably going to be multiple things, but I think it's like making sure you've got a vision for the future, right? So like, what does the next 18 months look like? And we struggle with that, because as a result, if you don't have that vision, then you tend to have this like patchwork model, right? You tend to not have I think the future is going to be about well-integrated, orchestrated blocks of information being able to effectively share, but it's predicated on sort of a common understanding of how an architecture that's designed, it's a little bit more future-proofed. And so enough of these one-off solutions, like it's really kind of about sort of creating this sort of vision for the future that's highly integrated, highly structured, with thoughtfulness, that continues to evolve versus dozens of tactical problems that check boxes but don't result in something that's going to serve the needs of the business well into the future.
Yeah, and true connection, it sounds like, across how you're really serving the markets with your people. And just tail on there, do you think is that a challenge for those that have like an engineering department where they're building other products? Like you're unique because your customers are the ones that show up in the stands, or like, do you see those that have a separate?
No, I think it's the same. Even when I was at the Weather Channel, it was the same thing. Whether you're doing product engineering, with consumer facing, or you're doing engineering for employee facing, I think the same principles apply. The degree of, scrutiny might be a little bit different, but you want to develop them as open solutions with APIs and extensions and take the best from what you think about from a product engineering point of view and apply it, from an IT perspective when you're developing internal applications.
I love it, Brian. I love it. Some really, really insightful, ideas there. I'm so grateful. I hope you're super well. And if there's anything ever I can do for you, or just anything for you and your family, just please reach out.
All right. I appreciate that, James. Thanks. Good talking to you.
So much. Cheers.
Bye now.